Heliocentrism has never been proven. It's a religion. Of course, not a religion about some personified God. A religion is defined as being a belief system built upon the doctrine of men without any actual verifiable evidence. It requires belief and faith. It requires belief in something that you can't directly empirically verify. And that's the idea that the earth is a tilted, wobbling, spinning ball flying around the sun. Contrary to popular belief, it has in no way been proven. We're going to get into it. Here is a bit of a timeline. Now we have an entire stream, a previous episode where we broke down each one of these events, but I just wanted to kind of cover some of the basics here so you get an idea of really where this came from. Oh, we knew the earth was a globe thousands of years ago is what you'll hear. Okay, so we have the globe earth inception in 350 BC, and this is, of course, as we know it, history as we know it. Then they supposedly found the distance to the sun in 250 BC, and you have Eratosthenes right after that. And when they first supposedly found the distance to the sun, of course, it was completely wrong compared to what they claim it is now, which is supposedly 93 million miles away, which is a joke. They'll tell you Eratosthenes proved that the earth was a sphere. Of course, he did no such thing. Looked at two shadows. The story's just completely ridiculous. There's no primary documentation it even happened, but it's a very convenient narrative to tell people to try to make it look like flat earth was disproven by Greeks so long ago. You have the first globe model hundreds of years later, all the way in 1492 is when you get the first actual physical globe model, which was just like laughable and disproportionate and deformed. But it's interesting, the narrative that we're told when you actually look at it. The first physical model of the earth being a globe ever made was in 1492. Then you get the Copernican model in 1543, and that's the idea that we're flying around the sun, right? That the earth is orbiting around the sun is in the center. Now, of course, they thought that the sun was in the center of the entire universe, and they've since had to change that. And then we get Kepler's laws. That's the laws that explain the planetary motion in terms of kinematics. And if you're not new to this channel, you know that kinematics are just how bodies move in relation to each other. People looked at the sky, saw that there's a ratio with how these things move, and you can actually, create an equation to describe that ratio, and it'll accurately, quote unquote, predict, although there is no prediction, they just keep doing the same thing forever. Based on their proximity, they move in relation to each other and move in relation to the sun. He found a set of equations to map that out. And then they estimated what the size of Venus was, the distance of Venus, and then they just said, you know what, to try to make this model, we're just going to assume the Earth is the same size as Venus, exactly the same, which is really scientific of them. 1666, Newtonian gravity, supposedly discovered gravity. There was no discovery. He didn't discover anything, or that would require he'd be the first one to ever see something fall. But anyway, so that's where you get 666 newtons on the Earth, or 6.66, and it's rounded up to 6.67. It's the same year the Selenian eclipse was first documented, conveniently enough, which also debunks the globe. Michelson-Morley, 1887, ionosphere, 1901, relativity, 1905, special relativity, 05, general relativity, 1915. NACO was founded in 1915, predecessor to NASA. You have the expanding universe theory come up to try to explain why everything makes it look like we're in the center of the universe unexpectedly. 1925, around that time is where you have Hubble looking out further into space and discovering they have a problem. 1931, the Big Bang Theory, dark matter to save the model because relativity's predictions were off by 99% when they looked at the galaxy clusters. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. You get to 1945, Operation Paperclip. You got the government bringing people over, bringing Nazis over. They put paperclips in different folders to have them integrate into the United States in different positions, right? Engineer, scientists, etc. So then you have the very next year after bringing them over here, they go explore Antarctica, Operation High Jump. And the CIA was founded the very next year. The CIA was founded the very next year. Now we know they do stuff like Operation Mockingbird, and they literally propagandize the American public. And then you have the Mars Project, written by Wernher von Braun, one of the people brought over in Operation Paperclip, an SS officer of the Nazi regime. And in this book, the main character's title is Elon, and he founds the first civilization on Mars. So just a coincidence there. Then you get to 1952. NSA was founded, and then 55, Operation Deep Freeze, go back to Antarctica. They ended up founding the first American base there called Little America. Then you have the DEW system in 1957. That is where they started actually monitoring the north. So they go out to the south, and then they come back out to the north, and they put up it's now called like the North Warning System, but there's basically a trip line around the North Pole, and they monitor anything inside of a certain latitude, right? And then you have NASA, founded in 1958, the next year. And then in 1959, they signed the Antarctic Treaty, so now they're monitoring the inside and the outside. And then you have the DIA founded in 61, Operation Fishbowl, high altitude missiles, of course, that part of Dominique, which translates to of the Lord. So Operation Fishbowl of the Lord, they shot high altitude missiles up. And then we got in the 30s, we actually have documents now that are declassified that says that they had approximation methods to determine the brightness of the firmament that were proven accurate, and that it has different zenith measurements, meaning that there's literally a distance, a zenith measurement to the firmament above you, and that they were able to accurately map it out. And then we get over to the JFK moon landing announcement, 1962. 67, there was a space treaty signed. In 67, you have Gus Grissom dying after saying we can't go to the moon, that it's ridiculous. The 1968, 2001 Space Odyssey comes out, film of the year, basically propagandizes everyone to believe we're about to go to the moon. And also Newsbenders comes out where they tell you everything about space is fake in 1968. The 1969 they supposedly go to the moon, and then they see the Earth from space, confirming the Earth is allegedly a sphere in 1972 at the tail end of the Apollo missions, and that's really like the only claimed real picture of the Earth from space for decades. Okay, so there is the timeline. I can construct for you a spherically symmetrical universe with Earth at its center, and you cannot disprove it based on observations. You can only exclude it on philosophical grounds. In my view, there's absolutely nothing wrong in that. What I want to bring into the open is the fact that we are using philosophical criteria in choosing our models. A lot of cosmology tries to hide that. You don't say, George. I mean, it didn't get any better since you made this quote. They completely try to hide it. They call it science, and they deny that it's basically philosophy. What he's saying here is that you can treat the Earth as stationary and in the center of the entire universe, and you can't disprove it with any observations. You can only say, I don't like it philosophically. And he says, I don't see anything wrong with that. Well, I disagree, but at least he tried to point it out to people, because he said people try to hide that fact and claim it's science. Claim number one is that the Earth is in motion. The Earth is supposedly spinning over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator while revolving around the sun 66,600 miles per hour on an axial tilt of 66.6 degrees. That's a positive claim. We need to kind of test that, and let me just break down some basic logic here. Do you ever experience that the Earth is moving? Of course not. We can stack rocks up. We actually notice when the Earth moves. It's called an earthquake, right? Because it's actually moving from its previous stationary position. We can see smokestacks going up just straight up in the air. From our observation, the Earth's not moving. Now, the globe claims it is, you just can't tell. Okay, maybe so. But you have to verify that, you have to give us some type of evidence to truly substantiate that, because the default position based on all empirical evidence, whether that be how we shoot missiles, how we fly planes, how we fly helicopters, how we do anything, we assume that the Earth is stationary, and how we even look at anything in quote unquote space is we assume the Earth's in the center and stationary. So if you're going to claim that's actually just an illusion, you have to of course substantiate that. So let's see if this claim of motion of this globe Earth model was actually verified, right? I mean, that's basic logic. We need to verify if this claim is true, because it seems like a lot of people don't really know what it is that they believe in, and they've never actually assessed it with intellectual honesty and logic. This is where they say that we live, and just a quick reminder, they say it's spinning over 1,000 miles per hour east of the equator, right? And of course, it's going at different speeds based on different latitudes, because it's a sphere. They claim it's tilted, wobbling, 3 different wobbles at least, on a 66.6 degree axis. And that's of course because 23.4 taken from 90 is 66.6. And it's supposedly orbiting around the sun, 66,600 miles per hour. And then flying through the galaxy over 1 million miles per hour. And really that's a typo. It's flying with the sun through the galaxy 500,000 miles per hour as the galaxy flies through space over 1 million miles per hour. Here's a quote: no physical experiment ever proved that the Earth actually is in motion. Lincoln Barnett, the universe, and Dr. Einstein. That seems a little different than what we've been told or led to believe, huh? We just covered the basic logic that everything we've ever experienced is that it's not moving, so we're gonna need some evidence that it is moving. To the question whether or not the motion of the Earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments, meaning as to the question of whether or not we can actually detect or perceive the alleged motion of the Earth in an experiment on the Earth, we've already remarked that every attempt of this nature led to a negative result, meaning we weren't able to actually ever detect, perceive, or measure the motion of the Earth that is assumed. Before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled to this negative result. That's Albert Einstein, Relativity to Special and General Theory, 1920, page 61. He then explains that the struggle so violent way back in the day between Ptolemy and Copernicus would really be meaningless because either coordinate system could be used with equal justification. I, of course, challenge him on that. You have to verify the validity or justification for the idea that it's moving. We know that the stationary Earth can be used with justification because that's how we use the Earth for everything. This is a hostile witness, and he says the two sentences, quote, the sun is at rest and the Earth moves, or the sun moves and the Earth is at rest, would simply mean two different conventions concerning two different coordinate systems, Albert Einstein and the Evolution of Physics, 1938. Of course, relativity is still used to this day as the glue for this entire claim that we're flying through space and just can't tell. So he says, while I was thinking about this problem in my student years, I came to the result of Michelson-Morley experiment. Soon I came to the conclusion that our idea about the motion of the Earth with respect to the ether is incorrect. If we admit Michelson's null result as a fact, this was the first path which led me to the special theory of relativity. Since then, I've come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment, though the Earth is revolving around the sun. In the context of Michelson-Morley and using the word optics, that would be utilizing light, which is the most precise form of measurement that we have to this day. You can use laser interferometry to very precisely measure motion. This is the Michelson-Morley experiment. This is a visualization. It's called the most famous failed experiment in history. They shot two perpendicular light beams. One is supposedly going with the motion of the Earth. The other one's supposedly going against it as it flies around the sun. So it should take one of the light beams longer to get to the receiver because it has to travel further. If that's the case, that's what we should see right here. It should be a difference called an interference pattern or a fringe shift. And what they actually saw was that it's way closer to being exactly the same. But if you look closely, it is not the same. What they did, instead of accepting the results saying, oh, we're not measuring this motion of the Earth, we assume, 30 kilometers a second. The Earth is supposedly flying through space 30 kilometers every 1 second, which is 66,000 miles per hour. They said, oh, well, actually the light beams were separated because we are moving, but when we tried to measure it, you just couldn't tell because everything is contracting in relation to the sun. And so basically the apparatus itself or anything you tried to measure it, it'll contract just the right amount to make it look like the Earth isn't moving. And this is called Lorentz contraction or length contraction. The problem which now faced science was considerable, for there seemed to be only three alternatives. The first was that the Earth was standing still, which meant scuttling the whole Copernican theory and was unthinkable. So he's covering a Michelson-Morley experiment here. He said they only had a few alternatives. First of which was, oh, the Earth isn't moving. The Copernican theory is that we are flying around the sun. And that was unthinkable. So what the evidence actually shows us is unthinkable. That goes back to how this is philosophy, not science. We still need actual evidence. This is Sir Arthur Eddington, a very famous physicist. The Michelson-Morley experiment has thus failed to detect our motion through the ether because the effect looked for, the delay of one of the light waves, is exactly compensated by an automatic contraction of the matter forming the apparatus. Sir Arthur Eddington, Space-Time and Gravitation, page 20. This is Einstein saying in 1921. Dayton Miller, who he's talking about, he just replicated the Michelson-Morley experiment over and over and over. I believe that I've really found the relationship between gravitation and electricity, assuming, and now of course he just took Maxwell's equations, but anyway, assuming that the Miller experiments are based on a fundamental error, otherwise the whole relativity theory collapses like a house of cards. This was the expected result, right? Because one light wave is supposedly moving further. This is what they actually saw. You see, there is actually a separation between the waves here. They're not exactly the same. They claim that the apparatus contracted because everything on the Earth is contracted in relation to the sun because it's supposedly moving around the sun. There is a separation. So what did they say? They said, oh, well, that's just instrumental error. Coincidentally, the instrument keeps on showing us error in the same direction that the sky moves, and it keeps on doing it. I think it was probably temperature. So what did Miller do? Miller started testing it. He started testing it with radiant heat sources at different altitudes, different times of the year, different directions, etc. And he saw that the effect was consistent and that there was no leg to stand on to claim that it was just instrumental error, which was the best that Einstein or anyone else trying to save the heliocentric model could come up with at the time. 4 years later in 25, he says, my opinion about Miller's experiments is the following. Should the positive result be confirmed, that the special theory of relativity, and with it the general theory of relativity, in its current form would be invalid. Then he's got Latin for experiment reigns supreme. Experiment is the supreme judge. Only the equivalence of inertia and gravitation would remain, however. They would have to lead to a significantly different theory. We've replicated it many times since then, and you have all these different tests that show that that effect is very real, meaning that there is a fringe shift, meaning that the light light goes faster in the same direction that the sky moves. Everything moves east to west. If you shoot light in that direction, it goes a little bit faster. So now if we go back and we take Einstein for what he said, not only does the evidence show that the Earth's not moving, not only is there no way to actually detect, measure, or observe that the Earth is allegedly moving, but the entire theory proposed to save the heliocentric model and claim it was an illusion that we're not moving has to be thrown out according to the person who came up with it. Again, from none other than Einstein. But when I was a student, I saw that experiments of this kind had already been made, in particular by your compatriot Michelson. He proved that one does not notice anything on Earth that it moves, but that everything takes place on Earth as if the Earth is in a state of rest. What they've had to do now is they've had to start updating and revising the argument. So, flat earthers are so stupid that they're constantly having to update their model in response to our arguments, in response to our evidence. What they say now is, oh, they didn't claim that it actually contracted. They absolutely did. I just showed you that. You can go read Einstein's paper. I've read it. He specifically says, oh, we see that Lorentz contraction is correct. It's just interpreted different through relativity. And there was a contraction exactly the right amount to compensate for the missing time difference or the difference in the light waves. So they now say, oh, he doesn't really mean contraction. Doesn't say that. It has nothing to do with that. That's a lie. I just want you to soak that in, that they have to actually bastardize the theory that saved their model, and they have to lie. They then said, oh, Einstein didn't actually even know about Michelson-Morley when he came up with relativity. It had nothing to do with that. Well, that's funny because we just read multiple quotes from Einstein himself saying that's exactly what happened. Claim number 2 is that the Earth is a sphere with a radius value of 3,959 miles. Supposedly, the Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, 24,901 to be specific. And the distance from the center of this sphere to the edge is roughly 4,000 miles. It's a very specific size sphere that's supposedly tilted, wobbling, and spinning, flying through space. So we can test that claim. Just like we tested the claim of the Earth is moving, we can test the claim of the shape. So the globe Earth model makes very specific dimension claims. If these dimensions are falsified, the entire model is falsified. So there's a depiction to show you, of course, what a radius is. Everything uses this R value, this radius value. Gravity, day and night cycle, the distance to the sun and the moon, supposedly how they go to space. They need a radius of orbit. You need a distance from the center to the surface of the Earth and a distance from the surface up to where they supposedly are in orbit to get your radius of orbit. If this value is not true, the entire model is immediately falsified, even distances to places on the Earth, etc. Everything about it. It boils down to this number. If you're actually seeking the truth, you would immediately go and examine this number. The horizon is merely an apparent location. The horizon is defined as where the sky appears to meet the ground. Sky ramps down to the eye level, converging into the horizontal vanishing line, or the horizon, and that's of course where you get the word horizontal from. And then the ground's ramping up to eye level, converging into the horizontal vanishing line. And that vanishing line changes based on atmospheric conditions. So sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's further away because there's more turbulence in the atmosphere, there's more density, there's different temperatures, there's different humidity, there's different obstruction. If the Earth is a sphere with a radius value of 3959, then that horizon is where that arrow meets the surface there. It's going to give you a physical horizon that's curving in all directions always. The horizon moves around. So we don't see an actual physical place or anything. We see an apparent place. The globe would claim, oh, there's an actual physical curve there that's causing the horizon. But since there's an atmosphere, it constantly moves around. You can never see the actual position. And just like you stand at the end of a long hallway or you look down a long street with street lights, you'll see that things above you look like they're converging down. Things below you look like they're converging up. And they look like they converge into each other in the middle vanishing point. The horizon line is not physical. If you see the optical diffraction limit, and this is a mirroring zone here, you see where it looks like the boat is up floating in the air, but no, actually it's just the horizon is just optical, and it makes it look like the boat is actually mirrored here. And you can tell that we have a diffraction limit. We have a limit to how far we can see relative to optical angles and atmospheric conditions. If the Earth is a sphere, this is still true. So we have the definitions of plane surveying here. Below are 5 definitions from various civil engineering forums or textbooks and from Wikipedia, which specify that the Earth's alleged curvature is ignored for surveying projects to 260 square kilometers or approximately 100 square miles, or more specifically to assume the Earth is a flat plane. So if professional civil engineers and surveyors are trained to ignore over 20 meters or 66.6 feet of curvature at 100 square miles, at what point are they trained to factor the Earth's alleged curvature? No, an engineer. Plane surveying is a survey in which the Earth's surface is assumed to be a plane. The curvature of the Earth is ignored. And this is for all engineering, whether building bridges, building railways, building canals. We actually have to assume the Earth's a plane and completely neglect the notion of curvature to do engineering in the real world. We have something called specular reflections, and if you see like the mountains reflected on the body of water here, and we actually have observations from many dozens of miles away where you see really big mountains reflected off the water. If the surface is not flat, you cannot get a specular reflection. If you see here, there's just a little bit of disturbance in the water and you see that the image is being messed up. Now, if this water was actually bending convexly, you wouldn't be able to get a specular reflection. In order to get a specular reflection, the water has to be flat. And this is because if not, you'll have a diffused reflection. It'll scatter. You won't be able to get the actual specular reflection coming from the water, so from whatever the object is to the water to you. Now, light doesn't actually travel, but we perceive it as if it does, and we're not going to digress. The reflection requires a flat surface to then give you a specular reflection. If it is sloping, bending convexly, or if it's concave, you're going to get major distortion. You cannot get an accurate specular reflection. We have long distance specular reflections on the Earth, all over the Earth, and that shows you that the Earth is a plane, that water is flat. If you go to like a circus and you have like the clown mirrors or whatever they're called, the reason they make you look so distorted is because they're curved. And since they're either curved convex or concave, it makes you look crazy. It gives you very distorted proportions. And here is the horizon, which is supposedly Earth curve, and we see just a time lapse of it throughout the day. We see it moves drastically, goes up and down. Now the Earth is not breathing in and out. It's not doing yoga and stretching. Of course, this is just an optical effect because the conditions are changing, and so it's causing the horizon to move around because that's just the vanishing point, the convergence point, and it's changing based on the different conditions. It's just an apparent effect. It isn't any physical hump blocking things in the distance. Another thing that we have that shows that the Earth is not a globe is long distance laser tests. People will say is, oh, it's actually refracting and bending around the globe, perfectly matching the globe. In reality, what we've done is we've actually gone to the side, we viewed from the outside and showed that it's completely horizontal. Over 30 miles, you can tell that it's parallel with the body of water, completely horizontal. That's impossible. It should be blocked by Earth curvature. They say, oh, it's bending around the Earth curvature. Then how come when we go look at the laser from the outside, we see that it's completely horizontal? They just literally claim that everything's an illusion. Now, here's another problem with the globe Earth. If the Earth is a sphere, then it must be curving down and away from you in all directions. What that means is as you go higher, the Earth is going to be further and further away from you because it's going down and away from you and you're now going up. Well, here's what actually happens when we go up in altitude on the Earth. You see where the starting line is, you see the horizon, and let's see what happens as we increase altitude. Look at that, the horizon's rising with the drone. The globe would have to claim that its perspective, the horizon, if it's Earth curvature, should be dropping down and away from you. As I go higher above the Earth, it should go further and further down and away from me. But the horizon is rising towards eye level with us. If the Earth's a sphere, this horizon supposedly Earth curvature that's going down and away from my feet. So as I get higher, it should go down away from me further and further. It just converges into that vanishing point. Another problem for the globe is long distance mirror flashes. The military uses these to allow soldiers to communicate and convey their location without other people being able to see it. So you just take a little mirror. If you tip it back and forth, eventually the light from the sun will hit the mirror in just the right way that it will reflect to the observer because it will have a direct line of sight. And the reason that they do this is because enemies can be in the area, but they won't be able to see the guy signaling the mirror flash because you have to have a direct line of sight with the person. You don't see the mirror until the light is at a perfect angle that you can see it. This is an infrared from across a lake where there should be significant curvature blocking this light, but instead we see it. The problem here is you can't claim it's refraction, because once you have it curving up from behind a hump or the curvature of the earth, you're not going to get that direct line of sight at that impact point of the mirror to be able to get the flash. It requires a horizontal line of sight. This has been done far beyond what the globe Earth's math allows. Radio waves can be sent over 10,000 miles with no Earth curvature obstruction. So we can just send these radio waves out horizontally. They can be detected and received over 10,000 miles away. Radio waves are nothing more than non-visible light. So microwaves, radio waves, light, all the same thing, right? In fact, what we typically call light is just visible light. It's all electromagnetic radiation, and there's a huge span of frequencies. And that's what radio waves are. Okay, so you have the radio spectrum labeled there for you, right? As you actually get to 300 gigahertz up to 300 megahertz, that's the microwave range. And then you have that very small portion being the visible light. Electromagnetic radiation going out horizontally can be sent over 10,000 miles successfully, and was done in the early 1900s. In 1901, we had the reception of the transatlantic radio signals by Marconi. If you have this tower that's just, a few dozen feet up, and then you shoot a radio wave out, well, the curvature of the earth is going to block the wave. So you can't send it 2,000 miles if you do the math based on how high you're sending the signal out from horizontally, line of sight. Then the curvature of the earth will block it at less than 200 miles. They're like, that's not going to work, bro. He's like, well, I'm going to try it anyway. First attempt successful, 2,200 miles away. So shot it like the earth was flat, line of sight, radio wave was received 2,200 miles away. So they had to come up with an excuse, and that's where Oliver Heaviside came in, and they came up with the idea of the ionosphere. And they claim that the ionosphere is an area of the atmosphere that is ionized. Of course, ionized gas is plasma. There's a certain ionization of the gas at a certain layer in the atmosphere that reflects the radio waves back down. They came up with this to explain how the Earth is in fact a ball, even though the radio wave should have been blocked by the curvature of the Earth. This is where you get the idea of skywave propagation. You see the depiction here. If you send something out horizontally on a globe, what happens is it goes towards space because the Earth is dropping down and away from you. They claim, oh, well, it goes up, hits the ionosphere, bounces back down, then reflects off the ground, goes back up, hits the ionosphere, bounces back down, and it keeps bouncing down, up and down. And it said that radio waves topping out with the frequency of about 30 megahertz bounce off the ionosphere in what is called skywave propagation, depicted to the right. Very high frequency signals with frequencies above about 30 megahertz, quote, usually penetrate the ionosphere and are not returned to Earth's surface, and that's from an official source. This creates what is called a skip zone or a dead zone. So if you see the little triangles there, the area in between is where it couldn't be received. They say that the ionosphere tops out at 40 megahertz. If you have ionization and you send a radio wave, it'll reflect back to you if the radio wave is a lower frequency than the ionization. So say you have some plasma over here and the plasma is 40 megahertz. Well, if you send out a signal that's 40 megahertz or 39, so 40 and under, it'll reflect it back to you. If you send out a frequency that's 41 megahertz, it'll go right through it. So if it's a higher frequency, it penetrates directly through the ionization. And here I have, do microwaves bounce off the atmosphere? While lower frequency radio waves can follow the contours of the Earth and bounce off layers in the atmosphere, microwaves can only travel line of sight, typically limited to 30 to 40 miles on Earth's surface. Under normal ionospheric conditions, 40 megahertz is the highest frequency radio wave that can be reflected from the ionosphere. Well, here is the world record, a list of world record amateur radio transmissions. If you look over to the left, this is megahertz, it's the frequency. So we have all these above 106 megahertz. If you look a few columns over to the right, you're gonna have the distance in miles right here. And so we have 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles. We have all the way up to 2,500 miles. There was a 106 megahertz frequency radio wave sent 2,500 miles. Now these should be blocked at a couple hundred miles according to the globe Earth. Well, the problem here is, just like it says here, under normal ionospheric conditions, 40 megahertz is the highest frequency radio wave that can be reflected from the ionosphere. These are over 100 megahertz and happen all the time. This is not a rare occurrence. If the frequency is higher than 40 megahertz, it would penetrate directly through it. And in the globe paradigm, continue on to space. And here we have them, instead of going 200-300 300 miles maximum, we have them going 2,500 miles. That is direct physical refutation of a claim that the Earth is a sphere. You also have microwaves, and they have a significantly more narrow beam. There's such a higher frequency, they don't span out as much, and thus they have much smaller span of diffraction. We have microwaves depicted as orange and radio waves depicted as the gray one. You'll see you have the microwaves shooting out and then also the radio waves. This hill here is basically going to represent the curve of the Earth. If we send these radio waves out to the hill will block the radio waves because the hill is higher than the tower, right? But since the radio waves are spanning out so much wider, part of the radio waves will actually span out to above the hill, and then it'll go past the hill and then fill back in behind it. And this is called diffraction. The problem is the microwaves don't span out as much, so it can't get past the hill because it's not wide enough to even be diffracted around the hill. Microwaves travel by line of sight. Unlike lower frequency radio waves, they do not diffract around hills, follow the Earth's surface as ground waves, or reflect from the ionosphere. So terrestrial microwave communication links are limited by the visual horizon to about 40 miles. Now we have them much longer than that, and of course the horizon shouldn't just be visual, it should be a physical geometric place, which means we should be able to do the math and know exactly where the physical curve of the Earth is. Doesn't matter where we visually see it. The microwave frequency range lies between 300 megahertz, 300 gigahertz. Beyond 40 megahertz frequency doesn't get reflected back by the ionosphere. It can pass through the ionosphere due to the microwave frequencies are not suitable for ionospheric propagation. Well, here we have them going 50 to 250 miles with a 99.9% success rate of reliability. That's a problem because it can't just be, it just randomly scatters and we get it. Well, no, the signal strength would have to drop down almost completely, which they don't, and you wouldn't have a 99.9% reliability. One true natural law is that all things seek equilibrium through pressure mediation. Now, it's very similar to what the second law says, which is entropy will increase as things seek equilibrium effectively. But this is the one true natural law. Everything that we see in physics is things seeking equilibrium. You open up a soda and it goes, psh, you shouldn't be opening up sodas, but it's equalizing to the low pressure around it because there's a higher pressure built up and it equalizes and it's instantly seeking equilibrium around it. If it's really hot outside and I'm running the AC, I open the door, the hot air will rush in. Quote unquote positive negative charge is just one system has excessive charge, one system has a lack of charge. So one is charging, one is discharging because it's in excess. They migrate towards each other to equalize. Everything in physics, everything in the world that we observe is just a process of seeking equilibrium. And I think it's actually there's a very deep metaphysical truth there. That's kind of like the process of what our life is. I think we're here to struggle, thus learn. I think that we're in a process of seeking equilibrium, and when you actually attain equilibrium, you're no longer here, right? I think you go back to the source. So what we see is this geometry all throughout nature because of this process. That's what this geometry is. And that's where we get the honeycomb, you have the snowflake, you have all these different geometric patterns that are reoccurring. And you may look at some of these and be like, oh, those are different, but they're not. They all fall within the same torus field geometry. So very important to understand that all natural design is governed by simple laws of physics, energy, frequency, and vibration. Nature shows us the unifying expression all around us. The holy grail of physics is a grand unified theory and a theory of everything. If you step outside of just blindly believing what the mainstream has told you about where you live, you can break out of that typically trauma-based mind control and think for yourself, then you'll see, well, we have a theory of everything sitting right in front of us. The vortex motion is a consequence of nature's vibrational geometry. You see, this is a ferrocell image of a magnetic field. And if you don't know, that is just ferro fluid with a few different types of oil you can use. You press it between two pieces of really flat glass, which is called an optical flat. And you just basically glue it around the outside, run an LED strip of lights around the outside. And as you put that over a magnet, the ferrofluid responds to the magnetic field, and the light actually lights up the fluid based on how it's being distributed, so you get to see the field effectively, what the field is doing. These are pretty incredibly beautiful images, honestly, and you see that there's a vortex in the magnetic field. This geometry being found everywhere, like we just saw right here, okay, really the actual manifestation of even that flower there, it has a vortex in the middle of it. You see the top left picture here, looks very similar, doesn't it? It is the same thing, okay? Everything is vibrational, and all things are seeking equilibrium. Any true theory of physics that's going to really progress us is going to be a theory of everything. Everything's going to have to be connected. Well, it is all connected. There's a common factor, vibration and charge, what people call charge, elementary charge even. So everything's electric and everything is vibratory. And this is where you would get this depiction of where we reside. We have a magnetic field in the earth. We would live on that plane right there. And then basically you would just have the ripples within this geometry going out around us. How does day and night work on the earth if it's flat? Like, okay, there you go. Let's check it out. Oh, look at that. It's almost as if we can just perfectly replicate day and night on a plane earth. And people are like, oh, well, why wouldn't it light up the whole earth? Why is it not lighting up the whole earth there? A local light source wouldn't light up the whole earth. It's just a ridiculous idea. Day and night works perfect on a plane earth. What about the summer solstice? Oh, look at that. It matches exactly what the demonstration does. It works perfectly. Look at it. Interesting enough, you see the geometry in both scenarios. Fits right within that geometry we talked about earlier. Yeah, because everything is that geometry. That vibrational resonance creates a torus field. Okay, well, what about when we see the sun set and it should set in a different location? Well, we actually can't see forever. We see in a circle around us. We're not Superman. We don't have x-ray vision. We can't just see forever, right? We have a limit to our view. And what that causes is basically like a dome around us, an azimuthal grid, right? We can't see forever. And we can replicate this. You can take a light source and you can put it over top of a dome and you'll see that there's different locations. In fact, you see, if you look closely to the dome, you see there's a light source here. So if this was the actual sun or light source, if you're inside the dome, you're actually going to see this. So as this moves across, you're going to see a different location. It's very easy to replicate. It's crazy that people don't get this. But so as you see here, the actual sun would move around and then it would cause it to look like it's arcing over top of you, just like we see with crepuscular, anti-crepuscular rays, rainbows, sundogs, etc. Right? It's just, we don't see forever. We basically see in a little dome. And that's because our eyes are spherical and everything is the same geometry. You have torus fields everywhere, elongated sphere of a torus field all over the place. And that's why you see this. The position of the sun and all the stars and the moon are all perfectly explained on a plane earth, understanding that we have a perspective that limits how far we can see. Now here is the sun position data from longitude observations all along one longitude projected onto a plane surface versus an actual pinhole camera long exposure of the sun for a year. When we rendered it through the computer, taking all the data measurements of the earth on one single longitude, this is what it gave us. Basically, this fits right inside the torus field. Again, we're always in the torus field. And it's funny how it perfectly matches the actual pinhole camera long exposure of the sun over the course of a year. So look at that. The year data matches perfectly on a plane earth again. So here we have a Ferrel cell image of a magnetic field. You see the actual geometry, the lines here, and we won't get into the complexities of the magnetic field, but I'll cover magnetism sometime soon. And then you have here, look, this apparent pattern that comes from the solar eclipse. It's exactly the same. Of course it is, because everything's intrinsically electromagnetic. And so this works perfectly on the plane earth position. Here we have all of the quote-unquote planets and how they move in relation to us observing from the earth. Oh, look, it matches perfectly with the Ferrel cell image. It's a beautiful, perfect, sacred geometry, flower of life, fits within the torus field. And this is exactly what we would expect to see, because that's what everything in nature shows us. If the earth is in the center and not moving, this is what's going on around us. And this is literally what we see. And of course, what they say is, oh, well, it's just an illusion. And actually, we're flying around in here too. Okay. So do you see that pattern, how it directly matches? This is all the quote unquote planets and stuff moving around the earth. Here is Mars from a quote unquote geocentric position, right? So with the earth not moving, this is what you get. Oh, it perfectly matches. And this is actually Kepler's little known diagram here on the right. This is Mars in the Tycho Brahe model. By the study of the orbit of Mars, we must either arrive at the secrets of astronomy or forever remain in ignorance of them. And that's what Kepler said. It's interesting. I mean, look at what it does. It fits right within this torus field geometry, bro. It's actually very beautiful. And here are all of them. You have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, which are seemingly wandering lights at a lower density layer. But this is the quote unquote ISS trajectory right here put onto a plane. and it perfectly matches. You have, look, here's another depiction of Venus and Mercury. All of this fitting right within the torus field geometry. This is a Ferrell cell image of a magnetic field again. This would be a top-down view. You have the vortex in the middle. Then you have these patterns, this motion coming through. Like basically you have these little ellipses that would fit inside there. And then the plane would be cut right through the middle horizontally, but this is top-down. Again, we have the vortex here. And when we did all these measurements, of course, we used Michelson-Gale-Pearson, used the Sagnac effect. Sagnac said this is the vortex in the ether that we're measuring, and we consistently show this vortex in this preferred direction of light that gets faster and faster the closer you get to the sky, which completely debunks relativity and supposedly the constant speed of light and all of that. And we've shown that there is in fact a vortex and that you can measure it. The light goes faster in the same direction that the stuff in the sky moves. So if you jump in a river and you swim downstream, you go much faster, right? Because you're going with the stream, it's helping you. As opposed to trying to swim across it, you're going to go slower, right? Because you're going against the drift. And this is what we see in very precise measurements replicated hundreds of thousands of times. And so let's take the magnetic flux data, put it on a plane. You see this vortex is clear as day. And just like we see in the depiction, the vortex is here, and this all fits within this geometry. Here's the side view. This white line would be what's called a block domain wall, or an inertial plane, meaning it's unchanging. It's just a plane through the magnetic field, and all these magnetic fields have it. It's called a block domain wall. Well, you look to the top down with the vortex, all the patterns. So this would be us looking down from above, quote unquote, space. This is where all these planets are moving within this, and it's all centered around the vortex, and this would be the side view of the Earth. And we just observed the top half of it. We took the magnetic flux data, put it on a plane, and look at it. It matches perfectly. It's very obvious to anyone with eyes to see that this geometry is matching all the way across it. All the evidence is showing us exactly what the Earth is. You have to believe everything's an illusion, but we just don't have any evidence, right? You have to just throw common sense out the window, throw pattern recognition out the window, and you have to deny the obvious fact that all of these patterns of what we see in the sky match this magnetic field Ferrell cell image, and so does the magnetic field data of the Earth, all vortexing around the center point, and we would observe the top half. Right, and so the quote-unquote North Pole would be up in the sky.